This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. A media rights group has added Bahrain and Belarus to its list of countries with the most restrictions on internet freedom. At the same time, the group removed Libya and Venezuela from a list of countries considered under surveillance. Reporters Without Borders released the lists in its latest Enemies of the Internet report. The group notes the importance of the Internet and social networks in the Middle East during what has been called the Arab Spring. It says social media like Facebook and Twitter have been firmly established as tools for protests and vehicles for freedom. The report identifies 12 countries as enemies of the Internet. Among them are Burma, China, Cuba, Iran, and North Korea. The list also includes Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam. Bahrain and Belarus are the newest additions to the list. Reporters Without Borders says Bahrain used repressive measures to block news and information after unrest began in the Arab world last year. It says the government has used a combination of methods to suppress the opposition. These include keeping international media away from the country, arresting bloggers, and harassing human rights activists. Delphine Algond heads the Reporters Without Borders office in Washington. She says Bahrain has a very developed system for watching and blocking online communications. She says the country has increasingly used these systems after unrest started. She says Bahrain has arrested bloggers and other people for what they published on the internet. She gave the example of Zakaria Rashid Hassan, who was arrested and accused of inciting hatred. Reporters Without Borders says he was charged with disseminating false news and calling for the ouster of Bahrain's rulers. He died last April. 2 officers have been accused of beating him to death. Reporters Without Borders says other bloggers and activists have suffered repeated physical attacks and been discredited by the government. As for Belarus, Ms. Elgond says its government has increasingly blocked websites. She says the number of affected websites blocked is growing. Even some news and opposition websites were attacked. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Prisuti.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. Nearly 1.5 billion people, mainly in Asia and Africa, were living without electricity in 2009. That latest count from the International Energy Agency was an improvement. In Asia, 3 out of 4 people in developing countries had electricity in rural areas. So did almost everyone in cities. But in Africa, the rate was less than 70% in cities and just 1/4 of the people in rural areas. There are many efforts to find low-cost ways to light homes. One idea is a water bulb. This system has recently been used to brighten more than 100 homes in the Korokocho settlement in Nairobi, Kenya. These included the home of Medina Musin's family. Members of a youth group installed the water bulb. First, they filled a 2-liter plastic bottle with water and a little bleach. Next, they cut a hole in the metal roof. They pressed the bottle halfway into the hole. Then they used silicone caulk to seal around it to prevent rain from coming in. In no time, the home was lit with about 50 to 60 watts worth of light. The combination of water and bleach refracts light from the sun and a full moon. The bleach keeps the water clear. Medina Musin, like many of her neighbors, was spending a lot of kerosene to light her home. Now, she says she will save almost half of her weekly income. Her son Abbas can now read a book at home in the middle of the day. Veronica Wanjiru and her 2 children also have a water bulb in their home. She says her older son had to repeat a grade in school because he could not get his homework done when their home was dark. She says, "I've seen a big difference, especially with my children's education. If they're given homework, they can finish it on time. And they don't have to wait for me to come and light the candle or go outside and do their studies outside so that they can finish their homework." In the Philippines, a nonprofit group called My Shelter Foundation has used a similar low-cost lighting solution in thousands of homes. The project is called A Liter of Light. The head of the group, Iak Diaz, says the idea is better than candles and kerosene and offers a great new use for old plastic soda bottles. It's safer, it's healthier, it's brighter, and the funny thing is, the light bulb actually comes from the place you'd least expect it, which is the trash bin. So it's the cheapest light bulb in the world. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can watch a video about the water bulb at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. Kane's Arcade is one of the latest videos to go viral on the internet. Since early April, the video has been viewed millions of times on Vimeo and YouTube. It tells the story of 9-year-old Kane Monroy in Los Angeles. He used cardboard boxes, scissors, tape, and other materials to build a game center in his father's used car parts store. Filmmaker Nervin Malik was the first to pay to play Kane's games. He is also responsible for the Kane's Arcade video. In the video, he explains how he met Kane. The filmmaker had to get a door handle for his 1996 Toyota Corolla. So he pulled into this used auto parts store and came across this elaborate cardboard arcade. He asked Kane how much it cost to play. He's like, for $1, you get 4 turns, but for $2, you get a fun pass. He asked Kane how many turns you get with a fun pass. He goes, 500 turns for a fun pass. So Mr. Malik got a fun pass and the idea for the video. Kane's Arcade has basketball and soccer, game tokens and tickets, and colorful bags of cotton candy. It even has one of those machines where you try to pick up a prize with a mechanical claw. Like at most arcades, the claw game is hard to win. But at $2 for a fun pass worth 500 plays, it's well worth the effort. Nirvan Malik says his visit to Kane's Cardboard Arcade gave him much more than he expected. He told us, "I felt like a little kid again, and it was like he'd given me this tremendous, unexpected gift." In return, Mr. Malik gave Kane an unexpected gift too. He created a flash mob through Facebook. He set up a date and time and invited people to come and help him fill Kane's Arcade with customers. The event was also published on the Hidden LA and Reddit websites. The news spread quickly. Kane had 500 Facebook fans by the time the flash mob took place. More than 100 adults and children visited Kane's Arcade that day. Kane called it the best day of his life. Since then, he and his arcade have become famous, and so has Mr. Malik. In his words, "There's a reason I was driving a '96 Corolla, and it's looking like I might be able to get to make movies that I've been trying to make for a long time." Mr. Malik created a scholarship fund for Kane, and to help other creative kids, the Gold Hirsch Foundation has agreed to match every donation up to $250,000. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti. This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. A labor group has begun investigating working conditions at the Chinese factories where many Apple products are made. Apple officials ordered the investigation after the New York Times described poor working conditions at the factories. The Foxconn Technology Group owns the manufacturing plants in Shenzhen, Chengdu, and Zhengzhou. Angela Cornell is a professor at the Cornell Law School in Ithaca, New York. She says many issues were raised last year after a number of suicides at the Foxconn factories. One issue is the number of hours that employees are required to work. Other concerns involve pay, living conditions, and even reports of violence against workers. The New York Times reported that employees sometimes worked 7 days a week. The newspaper said some stood so long that they had trouble walking. Widespread criticism of Apple followed publication of those reports. Mark Shields organized a campaign calling for better working conditions. Workers' lives are really hard and really severe. And there's terrible stories about people losing the use of their hands because of horrible, repetitive motion injuries. And suicide rates that are so high that they have got to hang nets off the sides of the buildings to prevent workers from killing themselves. Professor Cornell says the conditions at the Foxconn factories had to have been really bad. Just imagine how dire the working conditions would have had to be for those workers to sacrifice their lives. Professor Cornell says even Apple's own reports noted issues at some of its factories. These included involuntary labor and underage labor. These are important issues. The involuntary laborers are indentured migrant workers, and that is a crucially important issue. I mean, that's basically slave labor. More than 200,000 people have joined Mark Shields' campaign for better working conditions. The American admits he loves his Apple products, but he says he wants them to be made without human suffering. In related developments, Foxconn said it was raising the pay of its workers in China for the third time since 2010. And Apple asked the Fair Labor Association to investigate conditions at the Foxconn factories. Apple recently joined that association. The nonprofit group was established in 1999 to investigate working conditions around the world. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. Get more news and learn English at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. More than 20,000 new products appeared at this year's International Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, Nevada. Among the attention getters were Ultrabooks, or very thin laptop computers. Also, Microsoft announced new smartphones with the Windows Phone operating system. Far from the bright lights of Vegas are the poorly lit streets of Delhi. A new mobile app called Fight Back aims to make those streets safer for women like China Sika. She often works late. A company taxi takes her part of the way home, but then she has to walk 5 to 10 minutes alone. It's dark, and the kind of people who are around are not really to be comfortable with or safe, she says. Ms. Sika uses Fight Back to follow her location with GPS, or Global Positioning System software. Jagdish Mitra is the head of Canvas M Technologies, which launched the app. He says, the moment you feel uncomfortable, you really don't need to do anything else but press one button. The woman has a few seconds to cancel her decision. If not, a message with her location will go by text, email, or Facebook to anyone she has put on a list. The location also appears on a map in the company's offices. But Mr. Mitra says his company does not serve as a public monitoring center. The law has to be managed by the people who actually are authorized to do it, which is the police and so on and so forth. Officials reported more than 400 rapes in Delhi in 2010. Many media organizations have called the city of 17 million people India's rape capital. Kalpana Viswanath is a researcher with the women's group Jagori. She works to make cities safer for women through changes like better lighting and wider sidewalks. She supports Fight Back, but has some concerns. While the app to me is very important and has a good role to play, I think what we have to be careful about is that it doesn't again fall back on women to solve their problem. The makers of Fight Back say police in Delhi and other Indian cities have expressed interest in linking to the system. Hindal Sengupta is a founder of YPOL, a nonprofit group that works on the Fight Back project. He says Indian police often do not take women's safety seriously. He says most women don't go to the police because in most parts of the country, the police are seen as more part of the problem than part of the solution. There's a video about Fight Back at voaspecialenglish.com. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Development Report. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has announced a plan to get cleaner-burning cooking stoves into developing countries. The plan aims to reduce deaths caused by smoke from the traditional use of solid fuels and open fires. Almost half the world's people breathe smoke from coal and biomass fuels like wood, dung, and crop waste. The smoke can lead to lung cancer, heart disease, low birth weight, and other problems. It also increases the risk of pneumonia, a leading cause of death in young children. Women and children are most at risk because they spend the most time in the kitchen. Also, in areas of conflict, the search for fuel puts women at increased risk of violence. The goal of the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves is 100 million homes using safer cook stoves and fuels by the year 2020. Secretary Clinton said that clean stoves could make as big a difference in the world as bed nets or vaccines. She said, "The World Health Organization considers smoke from dirty stoves to be one of the 5 most serious health risks that face people in poor developing countries. Nearly 2 million people die from its effects each year, more than twice the number from malaria. And because the smoke contains greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane, as well as black carbon, it contributes to climate change." Founding partners in the alliance include governments and United Nations agencies, nonprofit groups, and the energy company Shell. The alliance hopes to raise at least $250 million within 10 years. The United States has promised to donate more than $50 million over the next 5 years. The aim is to create a strong global market for clean cook stoves. The alliance will identify target markets and work to get women involved in business operations. It will also develop indoor air quality guidelines, test clean stoves and fuels, and develop research roadmaps. The United States Environmental Protection Agency has donated $6 million towards the effort. EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson says the problem of cook stove pollution is really an issue of poverty. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can read and listen to our programs and learn more about projects in the developing world at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. The healthcare industry needs more nurses. All areas of the world face a nursing shortage, but the shortage is most severe in developing countries. Many of their nurses leave. They move to more developed nations for better pay, better working conditions, and better chances for career development. A World Bank report earlier this year called attention to the problem. For example, nearly 2,000 nurses left the Caribbean between 2002 and 2006. Caribbean nations currently have about 1 nurse for every 1,000 people. The ratio of nurses to population is about 10 times higher in the United States and countries in the European Union. Currently, more than 21,000 nurses who trained in the Caribbean are working in the United States, Canada, and Britain. Gaëtan Lafortune is with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris. He says the nursing shortage also affects industrialized countries. Mr. Lafortune says a large number of nurses are expected to retire within the next 10 years. At the same time, the healthcare needs of aging populations are expected to grow, intensifying the shortage of nurses. He says some researchers in the United States have projected that there may be a shortage of close to 1 million nurses by 2020. The United States is one of 31 countries in the OECD. Gaëtan Lafortune says in recent years, many of the countries increased their efforts to hire foreign nurses. But he says this has raised concern that OECD countries were mainly exporting their shortage problem to countries that may have an even greater need for these nurses. In May, the World Health Assembly approved a global code of practice on the international recruitment of health workers. The Assembly is made up of countries in the World Health Organization. The code advises against actively recruiting health workers from developing countries that face severe shortages. The world also faces a shortage of nursing trainers. As a result, nursing schools are forced to turn away qualified students. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. You can find transcripts, MP3s, and podcasts of our reports at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. Social media networks have come to play an important part in the political unrest in Syria. The Syrian government barred most media from the country after the unrest began a year ago. But that has not stopped Syrians from getting out information to the rest of the world. Many Syrians have turned to social media like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter to help spread reports about what is happening in the country. Hundreds, possibly thousands of videos have appeared on YouTube and other social media sites in the past few weeks. With few foreign reporters in Syria, social media have become a major tool for telling the world what is happening. Many news organizations have had to depend on reports and videos from people they call citizen journalists. Emmanuel Esposti is a blogger in Britain who has been studying the use of such videos by foreign media. She says it is very difficult to know where a video has actually come from or who made it or why. In early March, Syria's deputy oil minister resigned to join the opposition. In a video on YouTube, Abdo Hussameddin had a message for the government of President Bashar al-Assad. He said it had, in his words, brought a year of sadness and misery to those you claim to be your people. He also said the government had deprived its people of basic needs and humanity and brought the country to the edge of disaster. Abdo Hussameddin was the highest official to leave the government since the unrest began. In the video, he urged other Syrian officials to resign. Syrian opposition activist Abdi Hakim Ijburi also knows about the importance of social media. He used social media to contact other opponents of the government. He says many of them wanted to hold protests like those that took place in Egypt and Tunisia. At first, we started using Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter to get a group of young people and activists together, he says. And from that group, we started organizing. In his hometown, activists started writing anti-government graffiti on walls. Abdi Hakim Ijburi says that as the protests grew, he was captured and tortured. He escaped to Lebanon like thousands of other Syrians. He says there were lots of people in his hometown that he did not even know were part of the opposition movement or sympathetic to that movement. In his words, if it hadn't been for the social media, we wouldn't have become united. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. Samsung Electronics won a case in its battle with the American technology company Apple over property rights. A court in Japan ruled in a case involving Samsung's Galaxy series of smartphones and tablet computers. A 3-judge panel in Tokyo said the products did not violate an Apple patent for organizing music and video on several devices. The court also ordered Apple to pay all legal costs related to the case. A patent is a property right given by a government. It keeps others from making, using, or selling an invention without the permission of the patent owner. But the case in Japan is just one of many in the worldwide legal battle between Apple and Samsung. In August, a jury in California found Samsung guilty of willfully violating several of Apple's patents. The jury ordered the South Korean company to pay Apple more than $1 billion. The patents include so-called utility patents for Apple's pinch to zoom and tap to zoom technology. They let users change the way things appear on the screen of their device. Included are design patents on the look and shape of the iPhone. Madhavi Sundar is a law professor at the University of California, Davis. She has also written a book called From Goods to a Good Life: Intellectual Property and Global Justice. She says issues involving design patents are complex. Madhavi Sundar says patents are meant to increase competition and support design and development. She sees a problem with Apple trying to say its designs are something only one company can have. She adds, it raises the real question of whether or not we should be protecting designs with patents in the first place. Madhavi Sundar says Apple built its computer company using the same methods that it is now opposing. Apple appears to be saying that no one else can use its methods. Madhavi Sundar says this goes to the heart of what innovation is about. Samsung said the California court's decision, in its words, should not be viewed as a win for Apple, but as a loss for American consumers. And the company told its employees that it would continue to fight until its arguments are accepted. But the dispute is far from over. On the day of the California ruling, a court in South Korea ruled that Apple and Samsung had violated each other's patents. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Technology Report. Representatives from some of the world's leading broadband service providers and equipment manufacturers met in San Diego, California in December. They talked about the future of broadband and the internet protocols that govern it. Broadband is a high data rate connection to the internet. A group called Broadband Forum organized the meeting. It was the group's fourth meeting in 2010. The Broadband Forum has almost 200 members from around the world. They work to develop broadband network standards across the industry. Lori Adams Gonzalez is the marketing director for Broadband Forum. She says the group has been helping service providers move to the newest internet protocol, known as IPv6. Mrs. Gonzalez says the current version of the internet, known as IPv4, could soon run out of space. Broadband is one of the fastest growing areas of the telecommunications industry. A report from the Broadband Forum says the number of broadband subscribers reached 498 million worldwide in June. By the third week of July, it had passed 500 million. That represents 1 in 5 homes worldwide. Mrs. Gonzalez says much of the growth has come from an unexpected source: developing countries. Asia represents almost 41% of the total broadband subscriptions. More than 120 million of those subscribers are in China. The report from the Broadband Forum also looked at Internet Protocol Television, or IPTV. IPTV is one of the main developments leading the growth in broadband. IPTV uses fast broadband connections to bring television programs into homes. It normally requires a subscription and a special box on top of the television. The Forum report said IPTV subscriptions had grown to more than 38 million by the end of June. France has the highest number of IPTV subscribers at more than 9 million. China and the United States are next, with an average of more than 6 million subscribers each. The Broadband Forum released its latest usage report in December. There was more growth for both broadband and IPTV. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. Our programs are online with transcripts and MP3 files at voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Development Report. The Obama administration has launched the first in a series of projects to support entrepreneurs in Muslim communities worldwide. The Global Entrepreneurship Program will provide advice and other help for businesses to succeed. Partnerships between public and private organizations aim to assist with everything from securing financing to writing a business plan. The first project is being launched in Egypt. A second project in Indonesia is expected to follow soon. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton talked about the programs at a presidential summit on entrepreneurship. She said, "Now these initiatives comprise a first wave of programs to promote global entrepreneurship, but they reflect the Obama administration's commitment to a new approach to development, one based on investment, not aid, on supporting local leadership and ideas rather than imposing our own." More than 250 people attended the two-day summit meeting held in Washington in late April. Most were from majority Muslim countries. President Obama promised to hold a summit on entrepreneurship in his speech to the Islamic world last June in Cairo. He says the business market is the most powerful force for economic growth and lifting people out of poverty. He also says entrepreneurship is an area where countries can learn from each other. Tim Kaine is with the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, a nonprofit in the United States that works to increase entrepreneurship worldwide. He says the World Bank has found that simpler rules and other regulatory reforms make it easier to do business in the Middle East. The Global Entrepreneurship Program in Egypt will create several partnerships between American and Egyptian groups. These include the Egyptian Junior Business Association and the American University in Cairo. The United States Agency for International Development has a team of entrepreneurs in Egypt to supervise the program. The Obama administration plans to expand the program to 12 countries within the next 2 years. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. Transcripts, MP3s, and podcasts are at voaspecialenglish.com. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and iTunes at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Technology Report. If researchers want to know what happened on a particular day, they often look at newspapers from that day. But what would happen if newspapers stopped publishing? Future researchers would likely turn to the web. The Wayback Machine at archive.org has for years archived websites, but it only does this once a day for news sites and even less often for other websites. 29-year-old reporter Ben Welsh decided to create a site similar to archive.org. But he wanted to archive only news sites, and he wanted to save their home pages more often. Ben Welsh works for the Los Angeles Times. In May, he created pastpages.org. His website saves the home pages of 70 news websites from around the world once an hour. Ben Welsh says this schedule of what he calls harvesting is important in today's quickly changing news environment. Over the course of a day, the narrative arc of a news story can develop quite a bit, he says. He says no one had ever saved the home pages of so many news sites so often and made that material available to the public. He hopes to keep adding to the site until it is archiving material from up to 300 sites. Ben Welsh spends about $60 a month on storage space for pastpages.org. He feared the cost would increase beyond what he could afford, so he asked people for help through Kickstarter. People use that website to seek money for creative projects. Within about a week, he had gotten all of the $5,000 he had asked for, and more. Ben Welsh says he will use the money to expand his website. He hopes to build some features specifically targeted to media researchers and media critics. Stephanie Bluestein was a reporter at the Los Angeles Times. She is now an assistant professor of journalism at California State University, Northridge. She believes pastpages.org will prove to be a valuable resource. Now you could look hour by hour and see the placement of the lead story, how the headline changed, and how different newspapers played the story. Now you can actually compare, she says. Professor Bluestein says news today changes so quickly, even archiving once an hour may soon not be enough. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. To learn English and get more technology news, go to voaspecialenglish.com.